Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Shekhar, and the title of my today's presentation is Navigating White's Utopia, an active response to PUDD'NHEAD Wilson. So basically in this research, I am going to show that how Mark Twain personality was different from his Samuel Clemens self. Okay, basically Samuel Clemens, as we know, he born and brought up in the family where they have slaves and all these things, and while after he become a liberal Mark Twain, and how he become from this conservative self to expose this liberal self, and later how he sheds the skin of liberal Mark Twain to achieve White's Utopia. Basically this research is a part of my PhD research. The title of my PhD thesis was The Reform Aesthetic, Political Futurity in Select Writing of Mark Twain, in which I have tried to show that how after the failure of Reconstruction movement, Civil War, all these movements was attempt to reform the society in certain way, but that political reform failed, and how through his writing Mark Twain started aesthetic reform to achieve different sorts of reconstructions objective. So by setting this novel, PUDD'NHEAD Wilson, in the 1830s, Clemens attempt to make white race vigilant toward the impending disaster of black overtaking whites if the problem of color conflict is further ignored, right? So basically this novel written at the time of post Civil War society, and he has set the novel in the pre-Civil War society. So by going into the past, he changes the historical reality of the past to achieve different sorts of objectives. So in the novel, we know that Roxy, she switch her son with her master's son in order to save him from slavery. But this act can also be seen as that she, by doing so, aims to achieve black's utopia by placing her son Tom in a white milieu. In contrast, what Clemens did, he counters her narrative with the scientific invention of a fingerprint to unfold a path in realizing White's utopia by maintaining eugenics. Basically, eugenics is about maintaining the purity of the blood, right? So we have seen that how Clemens, who earlier in his narrative like Huckleberry Finn, he proposed the idea of brotherhood between a black man and a white boy, and now in this novel, PUDD'NHEAD Wilson, he rejects the idea that imagine between a black man and a white boy. So in this novel, he segregates whites from black through the science of fingerprint, that how this invention or the science of fingerprint can be used to segregate peoples. So he conceptualizes a blend of historical realism and minstrel tradition in this writing to debunk the direct references to historical reality. Basically, in Huckleberry Finn, he, while going into the past, shows his commitment to the truth by depicting the reality. But in this novel, he rejects the idea of depicting the reality in order to debunk the idea of that how by rejecting the reality, he eliminates the idea of narrative fallibility, because this idea of narrative fallibility creates a problem because it can be seen in the difference between the actual and the textual reality. Basically, the theoretical framework for this research is I have used different theories like reader response, memory studies, historical criticism, and narratology as critical approaches. So this research seeks to highlight the difference between the actual and the textual reality by employing the lens of negative criticism. Basically, it's a part of historical criticism to question the credibility of the author's statement whenever the actual basis of the doubt can be found. So in this research, I have tried to show the implication behind Clemens' writing style and how through Tom's narrative he's tried to achieve White's utopia. Basically, the novel, as I have already mentioned, written at the time of post-Civil War time and then set in the pre-Civil War society. So historical fiction, by looking at the writing of historical fiction, this research shows that historical fiction demands an active response because the reader's mind is a meaning-seeking faculty, which by nature discover narrative fallibility, even when the objective foundation for that discovery is lacking. So, this research propagates the idea of, in this research I have used the idea of active reader and passive reader. Active reader is about someone who goes beyond the surface of the text, who question the credibility of the author's statement, that why certain things happen that way, why this text written in this way, while passive reader takes the word of the author as it is. So a word about the past replaces the world of the past. So in my research I have shown that how a person should do active reading instead of going for passive reading. So the active reader response plays an essential role in an age that demands a historical and critical examination of the entire legacy of the past and will not accept uncritically the author infallible instances. So author, the intentional agent crafting fiction or figuring as narrator and character should be studied in greater details in contrast to the historical background, so that different kind of unreliability can be identified. So in order to achieve his objective, Clemens find a way to reach his intended goal through the science of fingerprints by throwing blacks to their ghettos and making the white society absolute in all manners. Now I will talk about how there was a shift in Clemens' personality from Huckleberry Finn to PUDD'NHEAD WILSON. Basically, the Huckleberry Finn written in an attempt to assuage the suffering of black people, where he has, by going into the past, changes the historical reality of the past by presenting different events like how black people's freedom supported by a white boy, how black people given voting rights in the pre-Civil War society, and Jim has been given voice and agency in the pre-Civil War society, which was not the actual case, right? So by presenting some instances, he shows that how this historical fiction, and by doing so he creates counterfactual history, and that counterfactual history can creates a future remembrance in order to achieve different outcomes. So while Clemens is divulged when I have shown that the difference between Twain and Clemens is divulged when Clemens and the Twain telegraphed President Hayes to urge him to rescue the vagabond niggers, while Clemens wrote Howell that he was eager to have one of those darkies so that he could write a delicious article about their foolish behavior. So you can see the split in the personality of the Mark Twain and the Clemens, who is not a different person, they are the one, but they have the conservative self and the liberal self. So basically this novel, PUDD'NHEAD WILSON, written when he went to the Sandwich Island with George Washington table after they met with the Kanaka's children, and their discussion on miscegenation gave way to the writing of the PUDD'NHEAD WILSON. Basically, this novel deals with the southern past, which Henry Smith not call as matter of Hannibal. So this novel starts with the idyllic portrayal of Dawson Langdon hugging the bank of Mississippi in 1830, while the subsequent chapter merges the historical reality into melodrama by depicting the black imitating whites. So you can see there is an attempt to show that historical reality and also the minstrel tradition, where by depicting that minstrel tradition, he, unlike Huckleberry Finn, did not show his commitment to depicting truth as he did in Huckleberry Finn. So the infliction of cruelty by white man on black man makes sense in history that failed to do such in the novel, because Roxy refutes while describing her masters as fairly human man towards slaves and other animals, while the historical reality was different, as Clemens articulated when he was 4. He had tossed and turned in his bed one night while listening to the groans of a captured runaway slave who had been tied and beaten in a sack near Clemens' home. There is also one of the incident that left Clemens awestruck. When I was 10 years old, I saw a man fling a lump of iron ore at a slave man in anger. It bounded from the man's skulls, and the man fell and never spoken again. So you can see the horror of slavery. So in this PUDD'NHEAD WILSON, the revised manuscript, He reduces the heroic figure of Jasper, indulging in sexual banter with the Roxy. In the original manuscript, Jasper sees an uncontrollable buggy coming toward him. He took a position, spat in his hand. Instant the flying horse was upon him, and that he grabbed him and stood him up on his heel in the air. Then the dust settled, and he had a great surprise, for he saw his young mistress with nurse baby sitting in the buggy. So amazed by his heroic prose, Jasper Master set him free. This incident was based on the real incident, which took place on August 25, 1877. I'll quote, John Lewis, a black handyman at the Clemens family summer retreat, rescued a cartload of Lewis Clemens relatively by grabbing the runaway horse. And Arthur Pettit described this incident, that how Clemens react to that situation, who at once added Lewis to his list of demigods. The Lewis incident is important not because Clemens found yet another hero, just because this time he gave the breath to a black man, but later his conservative soul does not allow him to hail the courageous act of this black person, so he removed that incident in the revised manuscript. So Clemens engages with minstrel tradition to satirize the spurious nature of black looking white, where Roxy, a black and white face, and Chander, presumed to be a black and white face, plays minstrel role as imitation nigger. Roxy by law and Chander by ironically means of Roxy, act of rebellion, becomes white. So how their personality change. And Tom imitates whites to certain extent that he sells his mother, Roxy, down the river to raise money for his death. So now I will talk about the white rage, how Plessy's case influenced PUDD'NHEAD Wilson. White rage, Carol Anderson in her eponymous book, White Rage, she shows that the white rage is not only about inflicting physical violence. It's about also the law, through laws, how that black people were persecuted at that time. So the trigger for white rage inevitably is blackness is ambition, with drive, with purpose, with aspiration, and with demand for full and equal citizenship. Even Andrew Johnson, who was the president, he said that this is a country for white men, and by God, as long as I am president, it shall be a government for white men. So there was incident of Plessy's case. It took place in 1892 when Homer Adolphe Plessy boarded the Louisiana Railroad car in order to challenge the state's railroad car law. And that law ordained in 1890 ordained that all railways company operating in the state to provide equal but separate accommodation for the white and color races. As long as he boarded the train and he announced himself as a black person, so he was taken in custody. So this deliberate act of going into the white coach was that he wanted to challenge the authority, but his appeal was countered at the court, Louisiana Supreme Court, by Justice Charles Fenner, who said, following the order of divine providence, human authority ought not to compel these widely separated races to intermix. So Roxy 116 blackness outvoted her 1516 whiteness, which alludes to the disenfranchisement of black voting rights in the 1890. So now I'll talk about how Roxy act of switching her children and by placing him in a white milieu is an attempt to achieve black's utopia, and how Tom becomes an avenger of black exploitation. So basically this novel PUDD'NHEAD Wilson is about the problem of color conflict imbued by the sin of miscegenation reflected in the paradigm of blood quantum theory and purity of white looking black people. So Clemens' sexual urge for black women stemmed from his visit to Sandwich Island, which revealed his notebook with the scribbling, which is apparent in most of the written down when after his wife died, Levy. So he endowed the character of Roxana with uninhibited mannerism in his black driven movement, while at the same time satisfying the popular demand for white, mulatto who appear to be white. So Roxana's black blood has given her license to speak in an uninhibited manner, differentiating her from the white ladies who maintain their decorum and status while speaking. So by portraying her as, he has, presented the character of Roxana as a white, but he has given her these characteristics of black woman in order to fulfill his desire. So Roxy cannot fight against the perpetrator of her race at the forefront. Therefore, she placed Tom as an avenger of master sexual abuse who exploited black women's sexuality and robbed black man's liberty. So through the character of Tom, Roxy expects the reversal of power structure to establish black utopia by showing that how a black man occupying the place of a white man, wielding the same power, usurping the authority of the white fatherhood, connotes a global reversal. So in order to counter her narrative, Clemens uses the science of fingerprint to achieve white's utopia. So the fingerprint technique is invented to catch the criminal, but in PUDD'NHEAD WILSON, Clemens goes beyond this method by posing it as a solution to restrain the color conflict. He is highly inspired by the book, Francis Galton book's Fingerprint, written in 1892, which developed the science of eugenics. So Michael Rollins argued that Galton's aim is to investigate the origin of natural ability to give the more suitable races or strain of blood a better chance of prevailing speedily over the less suitable. While Clemens, when this Galton find that the Clemens using the technique of fingerprint in order to reveal the race and temperament, he shows his disappointments, great expectations that has been falsified, namely their use in indicating race and temperament. Basically, it's a way to reinventing slavery again. So the character of David Wilson is an extension of Clemens' personality, whose practice of taking fingerprints, is a way to create a paradigm for whites, like how to segregate whites from black. So through Tom's narrative, Clemens very white about the problem miscegenation had created and how this problem can be solved. So there is an incident in the novel where Luigi passed right by Wilson from his palm. Tom utters, "A man on hand is his deadliest enemy, keeps a record of the deepest and fatalistic secrets of his life." So basically his identity cannot be revealed if Wilson had not taken his fingerprint when he was an infant. So it shows that how the science of fingerprint has been used by Clemens to indicate the class of the person. So Clemens strive to save the white society and their economic interest in slavery, which is fundamental to the white South. So now I'll conclude that this study displays Clemens' struggle in writing a realistic historical narrative without showing his commitment to truth, where in Huckleberry Finn he changes the historical reality and shows his commitment to truth, while in this PUDD'NHEAD WILSON he debunks the certain historical references, so the idea of narrative fallibility cannot be created. However, he invites trouble by altering the past to create future remembrance of the past. That's still an idea of narrative fallibility. So by placing Tom in a white milieu, Roxy aimed to initiate a white-looking black lineage vis-a-vis the white community by diluting the purity of FVV bloodline. That's the first family of Virginia. So in contrast, Clemens employ the science of fingerprints to create a paradigm like how to segregate whites from black to achieve eugenics, basically the idea of white utopia. So by doing so, he is restoring the status quo of the white community by eliminating the scope of black dissent. It validates that he is a southerner to the core of his heart. So these are the works cited. Thank you.